In World of Warcraft, players can choose between 13 different classes, and 3 of these, the Evoker, Demon Hunter, and the Death Knight, are considered to be hero classes, which are known by their unique gameplay, as well as starting their journey at a higher level than regular classes. What few players know is that in World of Warcraft's first version, known to most players as Vanilla, hero classes were actually supposed to be available to high-level players, and although the system of hero classes never made it past development, it still had a bigger impact on the original game and especially its combat than most players realize. This is the original hero classes of World of Warcraft. In the current version of World of Warcraft, there are 3 hero classes: the Evoker, which was added during the Dragonflight expansion, the Demon Hunter from the Legion expansion, and the Death Knight from the Wrath expansion. At the time of their release, they were all different from regular classes in that they brought unique gameplay elements, as well as starting at a much higher level, essentially allowing the player to get into the newly added content almost as fast as players of the old classes whose existing characters were already at the endgame. Due to these benefits, they all came with a set of restrictions, limiting how many hero classes one player could create, as well as locking them behind a certain level. Although over time, these restrictions were gradually lifted for each of the classes, apart from the Evoker. When the first hero class, the Death Knight, was introduced in the beginning of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, it wasn't actually the first time that Blizzard wanted to introduce powerful, level-restricted hero classes, because during the development for the original game, a number of hero classes were all being worked on. Some of these were the Blade Master, who would specialize in fast two-handed weapons, probably polearms, the Warden, who wielded swords and glaives, and the Archmage, who had access to some of the mage's more powerful spells, while mainly specializing in the Pngtree. Unlike the later expansions, where ideas for different hero classes were tested and then gradually narrowed down to a single class, such as the Death Knight, which was chosen in favor of other possible hero classes like the Necromancer, Runemaster, and the Monk, the latter of which was eventually added in the Mist of Pandaria expansion, although not as a hero class. The hero classes of Vanilla were different in that they were made with the intention that there would be multiple playable hero classes all at the same time. The way this was supposed to work was that high-level players would be able to specialize their character into a more powerful hero class based on the combination of their class and their race. Within this system, an Orc Warrior would specialize into a Blade Master, which allowed them to learn spells such as Bladestorm, while a Night Elf Warrior would specialize into becoming a Demon Hunter, who would use the Warrior Toolkit as a base, but with the addition of spells that mainly focused around countering demons and spellcasters, much like the Warlock's Fellhunter Pet. A Human Mage would become an Archmage, who could summon water elementals, as well as gaining access to powerful arcane spells, such as an early version of Arcane Blasts. The system was originally supposed to have at least one specialization for each race and class combination, some of which you can see on the screen here. Those of you who have played the Warcraft games may remember the name of some of these classes, and there's a good reason for this, because the heroes from the Warcraft games were, as the name suggests, the main inspiration behind the hero classes that World of Warcraft was supposed to have. And this wasn't just the case for their name and theme, but also their spells, many of which were taken directly from the Warcraft games. It should be noted that there weren't enough heroes to fit each of the race and class combinations, so some new hero classes, such as those meant for human and dwarf paladins, had to be made from the ground up. As World of Warcraft's release deadline grew closer, and with many other, more important systems still not finished, work on the hero class system was pushed back and didn't make it into the game once it released in late 2004. But this isn't to say that the system had been scrapped, and hero classes were actually still under active development during at least the first half of Vanilla WoW's lifetime. So by the time the system was finally abandoned, Vanilla was already nearing its end, and both players and developers were anticipating the release of World of Warcraft's first expansion, the Burning Crusade, which would also be the time when players got the chance to use some of the new spells, such as Water Elemental and Arcane Blast, that were originally intended to belong only to hero classes. Over the following expansions, more of these spells were updated and given to regular classes, and by the time World of Warcraft's fourth expansion, the Mist of Pandaria, released, Most of the powerful hero class spells had been made available, either being given to the Death Knight, which ended up being the game's first actual hero class when it was introduced in the Wrath expansion, or as new talent options for the old original classes. When the playable Demon Hunter hero class finally released in the Legion expansion, it had been over 10 years since work on the original Demon Hunter class had been cancelled, and over these years the Warlock class had inherited many of the old spells, meaning that the spells and gameplay of the Demon Hunter had to be built from the ground up. While the original hero classes never made it into the game themselves, some of their starting gear, as well as many of their spells, do actually exist within the game, either being locked behind unobtainable tomes, which would teach the spells if only players were able to get their hands on them, or being used by specific items and NPCs scattered around the game world. It could be argued that the absence of hero classes, along with their spells, had an important impact of making the gameplay of vanilla, and by extension World of Warcraft Classic as it is, as they locked away some of the more powerful spells, resulting in a slower game pace where spells and abilities make for simple combat, which is something that gradually changed as more impactful spells were added during later expansions. But whether a slower and less dramatic game pace is preferable to one that's more colorful and interactive will be up for the individual player to decide.